I'm going to lay my cards right up front on the table so that people know where I'm coming from. I do think this whole coronavirus story is an operation with several objectives. In other words, this is deliberately created pandemonium and media-driven hysteria and so on. But listening to the people in the line, I came to the conclusion that, yeah, part of the response that I was seeing in the grocery store was in response to the media hype and hysteria. But the other part of it, and this was an observation that a friend of mine made, and I heard it firsthand standing in line. The other part of it was this is the response of people that no longer trust anything their governments say.
Right.
And to a certain extent, that makes the whole story much more rational in a sense, because they're not responding so much to the media hype; they're responding to a long track record of cynicism, broken promises, lies, and so on. But looking at this story, I think if it's an op, it has as its premier objective among many. One of the other premier objectives, I think, is some sort of financial reset. But
Right.
at the top of the list is China. This is a way of striking a long-term generational blow against the Silk Road, because no one trusts the Chi-Coms to begin with. And now, with Xi's response having been so obfuscated, let's just be kind, this is going to put a long-term geopolitical blow against their plans for the Silk Road project. No one is going to trust them.
Well, they're going to need a lot more of their liquidity for internal instead of
Right.
building out.
Right.
Well, let me step back because I think what we're looking at is a fairly complex phenomena, and it brings
Yep.
together many different threads you and I continue to talk about regularly. And so I want to kind of step through them. And I just want to say we're in the invention room here because trying to get hard intelligence in this environment is almost impossible.
Yep.
And I watch the financial patterns. That's what helps me kind of discern what's going on. But there is tremendous uncertainty, and the other thing is the situation is highly fluid.
Yep.
So anything can happen here. So we're definitely in the invention room, and this is, as you would say, high octane speculation. I'm now watching commentators all over the world use the expression high octane speculation, and I would just like to underscore it started with Dr. Joseph P. Farrell. That's Dr. That's a Farrellism. Anyways,
Yep.
so let's just talk about what's going on physically in terms of, whether it's a natural flu
hmm
or, something that got out of a lab someplace or biowarfare. One of the things I want to stress is we don't know that it's one thing.
Exactly.
Right. This could
Bingo.
this could be there's a wonderful presentation bopping around right now about an anthroposophical doctor who described Steiner in 2018 saying every time the world increases electrification, you get a lot more viruses because it's the cells excreting the toxins.
hmm hmm
So, and I have all sorts of questions about what's going on with 5G, but you definitely had a diminution of health and immune systems in many areas of the world,
Yep.
certainly in the United States. So, and we have a cocktail of spraying and, nanotechnology and crap and vaccines. So there's a cocktail of poisoning that has been happening to people in many different parts of the world. And so, whatever is going on, one, two, three things, whether it's biowarfare, dirty warfare, that's happening within a cocktail of stuff. And
Yeah.
so,
The
right,
coronavirus story is the cover for something that could be many things.
right. So, you have two models. You have the dollar system, and it's been getting meaner and meaner and meaner to get everybody to go through their channel.
Right.
And you have China plus the de-dollarization crowd, which is mostly the oil producers. It's Russia and the oil producers plus China. and they've been getting more and more frustrated.
Yep.
And we saw whether it was Carney at the Jackson Hole, or Macron with the diplomats in September, or Putin with the BRICS in November. And then you see that interview with Herman Greff. All of them are saying, we can't coexist. It's going to break out into open war.
Right.
Now, here's the thing, you have the entire developed world ballooned with liquidity in the
Yep.
dollar-based system, and they have to have a place for that liquidity to go if you're going to change the system.
Yes.
If China and the de-dollarizers bring the dollar down before you have a place for those assets to go, then you get you get a world at war and you get a huge mess. And
Yep.
so what I saw in the financial patterns was somebody decided to take a whack at China and the de-dollarization crowd because they're playing the oil card, Joseph.
Yes. Yes.
That's how they brought down the
Bingo.
Soviet Union the last time. They played the oil card, and you are
Yep.
doing everything. And if you look at the extreme shutdown of the use of oil throughout the developed world, they are doing everything in their power to bring the oil price down, is what it looks like to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I agree with you.
it's not just a currency war. I was talking about a currency war, but it's about an economic channel. Are you going to go
Yes.
through my channel, or are you going to go through the own channel? And if we pull it apart, then the dollar channel urgently needs to get the new digital currencies up and running.
Yep. Yep.
So the push, the climate change op was not working. The push for the smart grid and brain machine interface is on. And
Yep. I agree. Yep. I agree.
so here's my concern. My concern is it possible? So let's take China and the oil producers on one side, with some bricks. And that included Italy. Italy was the one member of the G7 who'd done a big deal with China on the Silk
That's
Road.
right.
And so who suddenly gets targeted? Where does this start? It's China, and it's the city that has the big French installations and manufacturing. So it's China, and then Iran, and then Italy. What a
Yep.
remarkable coincidence is
What
that?
a yeah. It's interesting to me that right out of the gate, it was Russia that closed her borders
Right,
before Trump did.
right.
And this is therefore not spread to Russia at all in any major way. So in other words, you look at the Russians and they do have a very capable biowarfare
Yeah,
capability.
they do.
So I suspect that their intelligence was telling them, okay, this is some sort of happen. I mean, we've got to close the borders, which they
Right,
did. So
right.
they've essentially taken an action against their closest ally.
Well,
So
if you look at what Putin did with the Constitution and changing the team,
right,
he was ready to go to the mattresses. What he was saying is a war is
yep,
coming. I'm
yep,
completely re-engineering everything to make sure we succeed at whatever that war is. And then the first minute you have a hint that there's something going on, he closes his borders. Because
yep,
I think he was told you can go with Europe or you can go with China. You pick. It's one or the
yep,
other. If you go with
yep,
China, you're a target. And he,
yep,
you know, let's face it, Europe is his biggest customer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So these are all indicators, as far as I'm concerned, Catherine, that yes, part of this operation has been to reset the global economy and global economic geopolitics, and China is in the crosshairs. There's no two ways about this.
Right. Every week we do a My 21 2020 poster. The idea was we were all going to talk about the missing money at the campaign gatherings, which we now are not allowed to have. But it's a
Right.
picture of the Fed chairman, Jay Powell, and it says, you authorize 1.5 trillion for the repo market, 500 billion bond, and 200 billion mortgage-backed securities purchases. That is 6,687 per citizen. What about authorizing 21 trillion to return the missing money, or 5 trillion to
Yep.
fund the pension funds? Too
Yep.
bad we're not allowed to gather in public places to discuss all of this, feeling like a one-way street on Main Street.
Yeah, and your point there is well taken. This whole thing is also a strike against constitutional rights,
Well,
big
basically,
time.
here's what you're saying. I'm going to print tons of money for all my
Yep,
pals.
yep,
And meantime, I'm going to shut you down
yep,
so that the value of what you control and have drops enormously. And then all my pals that have the liquidity that I print with your tax dollar and your
yep.
credit, they can pick your stuff up for 10 cents on the dollar. I'm going to finance it with your money because let me go back. My biggest fear here, Joseph, is of a cut and run.
Yep. Same here.
So I said FASB 56 gives them the ability to borrow money through the Treasury, send that money God knows where out the back door, while our pension funds are filling up with this paper that could be worthless.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
Now, I add to that the thing I sent you. As soon as I saw it, I said, "Holy cow." I don't like inundating you with email, but I see these things and I go, Joseph has to know about this. The banks hired a lobbyist group and have put together a group to lobby to move their reserve requirements from
Oh yeah,
10% to 0%.
I know. Yeah, it's almost as if they're using this crisis to say, well, we're tired of all the criticism of fiat fractional reserve banking, so we're just going to get rid of the idea of a reserve.
We'll take fractionalism to infinity.
Yeah, we'll take the fraction to infinity.
You and I talked about, I had said that they wanted to put humans and robots in the same labor system and the
Right,
same taxation system. And that was part of
right,
why we're seeing all the crazy transgender stuff. But I also think if you look at this vision of sort of brain machine interface, smart grid, mind control, it's again because they want to put the robotics and the drones and the human labor all in one integrated workforce.
right, right.
And here's the most gruesome part of this, Joseph. If the guy who has the best AI is the guy who's got the most data, then if I can get the machine brain interface into every human, then I can get the AI being fed by humans who will teach the robots
Yep,
how to be more efficient. It's a
yep,
little bit like, how the company outsources to India and they have their workers go to India to train the people who are going to take their jobs.
yep.
Well, it's almost like they want the AI working with our brains to teach the robots how to be efficient.
And the big problem is if that's what they're about, and I don't doubt that that's one of their goals. The big problem there is a little thing called electromagnetic pulse.
Right.
because because if you have that kind of system, it can be all of it can be taken down in one fell swoop,
Right.
and then you're left with a bunch of humans without that human machine interface, and who don't know how to do anything.
Right.
Who don't know how to fix an airplane or an elevator or a farm tractor or
That's
whatever.
happening now.
That's happening now.
Right, that's happening now.
It's
It's
happening now.
funny. I'll never forget my cousin getting disgusted with how much he had to pay to fix his tractor. And he went out and he got a manual the size of the abridged Oxford English Dictionary. It showed how to do the tractor, and and he figured out how to build and take it apart and put it back together. Basically figured out he taught himself tractor mechanics. He was fixing his own tractor. And
Right.
then Deere started with software, and you're not allowed to touch it, and you can't know how it works.
Yep.
It's all a black box, and it's all just it's like Terminator seeds. It's just designed to create and extract more centralized profit, but it destroys all the resiliency and the productivity in the economy.
Yes.
Uh,
Precisely. And that's
Unbelievable.
it is unbelievable. But by the same token, I think that's why you're going to see again. You're going to see pushback against that.
Right.
You're going to see people buying more and more used cars that don't have all of that gimmickry inside of them. You're going to find manufacturers starting up to produce things that don't have the black box in them. So again, for every centralizing action, there's going to be a reaction. it's just an inevitability, because the one thing that marks human beings out is we don't want to be slaves.
Right. Right. And my concern is enough people aren't going to see it coming, which is why I keep beating the drum.
Well, that's my concern too, and
Right.
I'm with you on beating the drum.
So here's a question for you. You and I
Hmm.
have talked many times about, my analogy is it's like the guy who's got two families and he's trying to finance them out of one paycheck,
Right,
and one family doesn't know the other exists.
right.
So have we reached the point where you can't, because the general population is growing and they always want more, and the black budget is growing and it always wants more. And if we reached a tipping point where you can't keep both of them going and both of them secret, or one of them secret from the other.
Oh, I think so. Yes, I absolutely think so. It's well, let me put it this way. I just did a blog yesterday about this coronavirus quarantine idea, and it's gone now so far as to cancel a European Space Agency probe to Mars.
That was great. I posted that. I've been posting a lot of your posts. Your posts have been great, but that one, it was like the people on Mars don't want to get the coronavirus.
I know. It was just, the absurdity reaches new heights every day. But the more I thought about that, I ended that blog with the idea that, okay, this brings back my idea of a quarantine zone around Earth that I spoke about in the 2015 Secret Space Program
Right,
conference.
right.
And you just got to wonder why the lockdown of space occurs coincidentally with all of this other stuff. And it really is beyond the pale. I had a bunch of people sending me this video of this weird, I don't know what to call it, giant thing that NASA supposedly videotaped near the sun that looks kind of like Ezekiel's wheel. In other
That
words, it's
was so
clearly
strange.
it's clearly an
Yeah,
artificial object if it's real. If
right.
NASA's not making it up. And again, I don't put anything past these people, but if it's real, it occurs at a very weird time with all of this virus story going on, and then all of a sudden, well, we can't send any more interplanetary probes because we we don't want to carry coronavirus to the other planets. So something weird is going on.
Look at the name Corona. I mean, Corona is the sun's aura, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Right,
electrical coronas. You've got all sorts of coronas.
right.
So this whole thing is kind of code, and I don't put anything past these people that if they're trying to accomplish several objectives at the same time, well, they code that in the very name that they
Well,
give the
you
story.
know the Saint Corona is the patron saint of pandemics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
just,
Like we need a patron saint for pandemics, but anyway, yeah, it's very oddly named.
let's talk about dump and pump, because
Okay.
I've been saying for 5 years, somebody pointed out the other day, we're way overdue for a 25% correction.
Oh yeah.
And they had ginned and juiced this market, beyond anything anybody thought was possible. And it was really topping at the end of the year. And so the question was, how could anybody in the dollar world make any money in the stock market? It had peaked.
Right.
So now, thanks to the pandemic, we can blame the pandemic that the market's down over 25%.
Precisely.
That's a dump. I mean, if you
Yep.
look at the speed it came down, it's just dramatic. Once the margin calls clear out,
Hmm.
let's assume they have a way of handling the derivatives. Once you get the margin calls cleared out, and let's assume they print enough trillions to deal with the derivatives, you're going to have a hell of an opportunity.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But here's the question though. Do they really have enough money to clean out the derivatives? We're talking, the last figure I saw on the derivatives sloshing around in the system was $17 quadrillion.
So they do have enough money to deal with the derivatives. What they don't have is a way of controlling the inflation once they deal with the derivatives.
That's the problem.
Right. The reason it's so urgent to get the smart grid in place and technocracy in place is because there's a, you can't deal with the inflation without that control. And in some respects, you can't deal with the deflation on income that the robotics is going to happen. So if you look at your control issues, you've got to get complete control fast. And the Chinese was forcing the system to come down faster than you could handle and bring up your alternative. Because all the different narratives you had to build this new thing were stalling. And so that's why I see Mr. Global just reaching a level of frustration and say, I want all this stuff in place now.